Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're looking at a true story that honestly feels like it was ripped right out of a Hollywood spy thriller. We are going to examine a wild moment in presidential security where the line between illusion and reality was completely blurred, and standard operating procedures, yeah, they were thrown entirely out the window. Picture the scene. It's July 8th, 2026, wrapping up the NATO summit in Turkey. The entire world was watching what looked like a perfectly standard, highly orchestrated presidential departure. The famous presidential aircraft is sitting right there on the tarmac. Cameras are rolling, staff are boarding. But the plane everyone was watching? It was totally empty of its most important passenger. That highly publicized departure you saw on TV was a complete illusion.
So okay, let's dive into this. If the President of the United States wasn't on the aircraft that the entire world was actively watching, where exactly was he? And maybe more importantly, how on earth did security teams manage to pull off such a massive logistical deception right under the noses of the international press?
Let's start with Section 1, the illusion of normalcy and the mechanics of a clandestine transfer.
To really understand how they pulled this off, look at the stark contrast between public perception and shadow reality. To the public and the press pool waiting with their cameras, everything looked like a completely routine end to a NATO summit. But in reality, a clandestine transfer was taking place using an airport catering truck, of all things, moving the president to a completely different alternate military plane hidden out of sight.
Which brings us to Section 2, the secret threat, specifically concerning Iranian intelligence.
Now, the Secret Service doesn't just abandon their standard, highly rehearsed playbook for no reason, right? Intelligence agencies had detected a sudden and severe danger. According to reporting by the Washington Post and a few other outlets, American intel picked up on a possible Iranian plot. And the specific threat? A potential attempt to target the expected presidential aircraft with a surface-to-air missile. That terrifying piece of intelligence meant the standard visible departure was suddenly a massive potential trap.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the concept of a predictability pattern. In the world of high-level security, a predictability pattern is your absolute worst enemy. It's a known, established routine, like, say, a heavily publicized presidential departure. Everyone knows the plane, everyone knows the schedule, and anyone can watch it move. This makes the target incredibly easy to track, and unfortunately, much easier to attack. So to neutralize that surface-to-air missile threat, the security team had to completely shatter this established pattern.
Moving right into Section 3, the catering truck switch and executing the escape.
The logistics of this maneuver are just absolutely fascinating. Step 1, security sets up the expected aircraft as a decoy. They let the public-facing departure proceed completely as normal to draw all the attention. Then, Step 2, in a move right out of a movie script, they conceal the president inside an airport catering vehicle. Instead of walking out in the open across the tarmac, he's entirely hidden away among the food carts. Step 3, that catering vehicle slowly drives across the active airport to secretly transfer him onto a completely different military plane waiting totally out of sight. I mean, the tension during that slow drive across the tarmac must have been through the roof.
But pulling off a secret of this magnitude required extreme measures, and yeah, that included leaving people completely in the dark. The presidential press pool, the very people whose literal job it is to document the president's every move, were completely unaware of the switch. They continued with their expected travel arrangements, literally watching a decoy plane. For a brief period, the exact location of the president was completely undocumented by the press. The White House later had to defend this highly controversial decision, citing the extreme life-or-death security needs of that specific moment.
Section 4, the decoy dilemma, which presented a really dangerous risk.
Now here's a fascinating and honestly somewhat ironic wrinkle to the whole operation, coming straight from the president's own perspective. After the fact, Donald Trump confirmed the switch happened, saying he followed the instructions of the Secret Service and the military. But he also stated something super interesting. He believed the alternate military aircraft he ultimately traveled on may have actually been more vulnerable than the original plane. Why? Well, because if the attackers somehow anticipated the switch, he was now sitting on a potentially less protected aircraft.
And this brilliantly illustrates a really complicated risk. A decoy only works if the attacker doesn't know it exists. If the deception is somehow uncovered by the enemy, well, that alternate route can suddenly become the far more dangerous option. It's essentially a high-stakes psychological game of chess being played out in real time, right there on an airport tarmac.
Finally, Section 5, the truth revealed, and how this operation actually leaked.
So how did the public even find out about this? Well, for weeks, the official version of events held up perfectly. Let's look at the timeline here.
On July 8th, the secret switch happens in Turkey, and the world believes the president flew home normally. Over a month of complete silence follows. Then, on August 10th, investigative journalists at the Washington Post publish a report detailing the Iranian threat and that secret military aircraft. Just 2 days later, on August 12th, Donald Trump publicly confirms the switch himself, instantly turning an unverified media report into an acknowledged historical fact.
So the crucial point is that while the event itself is now completely confirmed, the whole situation leaves us with some pretty massive unanswered questions. Like, what specific intelligence actually triggered the switch that day? Just how credible was this reported Iranian threat? And perhaps most chillingly, how close was the United States to an actual attack? Because this directly involves active national security, a lot of these classified details remain heavily guarded and totally hidden from public view to this day.
What this entire covert operation demonstrates is a fundamental rule of high-stakes protection. Sometimes the absolute best defense is unpredictability. Even the most sophisticated, highly armored aircraft in the world cannot simply absorb or eliminate every single possible threat. When the danger is high enough, you have to change the route, change the timing, and deliberately deceive the public in order to protect the target.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought to consider. We only know about this catering truck switch because it eventually leaked to the press weeks later. When the US president travels today, what else aren't we seeing? The next time you watch a highly publicized, perfectly choreographed presidential event, just remember, the most important part of the journey might just be the exact part nobody is supposed to see. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what's happening behind the scenes.